So yesterday we heard from our tourism minister, Caroline Proulx, Quebec, following through on the promise it made after that deadly fire in Montreal on short-term rentals and fines and how to handle that situation on platforms like Airbnb and others as well. So I want you to hear this clip because it seems to me not long after that terrible fire in Montreal, the folks from Airbnb were summoned to meet with the tourism minister at the time, and you think that something could have come of it. And what we found out today, and Olivia O'Malley is going to join us in a second, but it's this idea that the minister must have felt that didn't really go very well or go anywhere at all because now there's some new rules out there. She was asked about that today. Here's what she said.
I really thought that, after many, many conversations with platforms such as Airbnb, that they would comply to Quebec's rules. Obviously, they didn't. And when we called them in a meeting earlier this month, I think I made it extremely clear that it's game on. And here are the new rules that you'll have to comply. And especially the fact that they will have to have a mandatory person living in Quebec with a valid address, a valid email, a valid phone number, to make sure that if there are fines to be paid or fines to be delivered, should I say, that we'll be able to get in touch with them. And these people will have to make an update of how we can reach them every year to the ministry and to the minister.
Pretty tough talk there from the minister and pretty hefty fines reaching $100,000. As I said, Olivia O'Malley is on the story today. Hi, Olivia.
Hi.
What else we find out? Because the minister was talking tough, as you heard in that clip. What else do we know?
Exactly. It's really a crackdown on landlords and the sites that they're advertising on. It really puts more onus on these landlords who are renting out their units for Airbnb and sites like Airbnb, Kijiji, or Facebook Marketplace. Now, the legislation requires all listings to have an operation certificate from the province. It would then be illegal to publish a listing on sites like Airbnb without the number and expiry date. That listing would also have to be posted outside the building at an entrance, let's say, and already the listing is supposed to be complying with municipal regulations, but on top of all these new rules that have been brought in, as well as complying with municipal regulations.
What do we know in terms of, so we know that $100,000 potentially per offense. So as the minister pointed out, that can add up pretty quickly, 5 offenses, $500,000. What do we know about enforcement, Olivia? Was there anything said about that?
Well, it's going to be enforced, Caroline Proulx actually says it should be enforced by Revenu Québec. They will be the ones to make sure that these certificates are being issued and that they are on the website as well. But like you mentioned, $100,000 for each illegal listing. Now, that's a fine for platforms like Airbnb, but individual renters and people who are renting out their places for their part could face up to $50,000 in fines if a registration number is fake or inaccurate. And like you mentioned, it's for each offense. So
that's huge.
Yeah, exactly. So for Airbnb, if that number can add up pretty quickly, and I'm pretty sure Revenu Québec will be following through on that.
Yeah, I know the minister made a point of saying how much money were already handed out in fines. Doesn't mean they were paid. And I think she used $5 million as the number. I mean, it's pretty significant. But my question is, she says in that clip that we just played, she hasn't really gotten the sense from any of these social media platforms, these rental platforms, that they're all that interested or that they want to comply. Have we heard anything from them post this announcement?
Well, I did reach out to Airbnb today. I got an email statement. They weren't available for an interview, but they did say they're reviewing the proposed changes and we will have more to say upon further review. But other than that, pretty tight-lipped.
And then let me ask you, have you been on these sites personally? Have you noticed if there are fewer ads being placed and if they seem to be more, official looking?
Well, it's interesting because I spoke to Tourism Montreal CEO Yves Lalumière today, and he did say they have noticed that the number of listings on Airbnb has been cut in about half.
Wow.
Tourism Montreal is in favor of this law because they want people especially who are visiting Montreal and taking in the city, that they're safe and that they're staying in legal lodging, but he really wants to make sure that Airbnb can survive, and because collaborative lodging, like he mentioned, is very important for tourists and to keep revenue going in the city.
Yeah, it's worth mentioning because when this story first came up, and I remember the thing that surprised me was, as much as we're going to blame Airbnb, people here who were listing properties on these sites were using bogus numbers, right? They know you have to have a number from the government to be able to do this, like a confirmation, like a permit number, and they just say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and that was good enough to get on Airbnb, and there was no sort of secondhand checking on those numbers. So when I hear you say now, that the numbers have basically been cut in half of people putting, these rental properties up online, you're beginning to, I guess, have people realize that the government is taking this seriously.
Mm-hmm. And I think I also spoke to Valérie Plante today, Montreal's mayor, and she said that as well. She thinks this is a big will from the government of Quebec to make sure that these platforms are held accountable and people who put these ads on these platforms are held accountable. But she also did mention that the devil is in the details when it comes to enforcing the law, that she mentioned, it's still being debated in the National Assembly, but going forward, she would like to learn or figure out how municipalities or residents can even call Revenue Quebec to say, hey, there's a illegal Airbnb, I think, that you should check out. So she's curious to see how it'll be enforced down the line.
By the way, this is a provincial bill that's being tabled, right? Bill 25. I'm just wondering, how are cities involved beyond the provincial government? I mean, if Revenue Quebec is in charge of enforcing this, how are cities involved? Do we know?
Well, they will still have to comply to municipal regulations on top of getting this provincial certificate. Okay. But I think that's kind of one of the questions Valérie Plante is raising is how can we report this as a city? How can we raise it to the province and what can be done to kind of push this over to Revenue Quebec because it is under Revenue Quebec's jurisdiction.
Right. Okay.
Lastly, I'm throwing this at you and it's okay if you don't know the information. I'm just wondering about lawsuits. I know we had heard about one father launching, I think it was a $22 million lawsuit against Airbnb and that the owner of that building in Old Montreal. Have we heard anything more about that, Olivia?
I'm not sure of any advancements, unfortunately.
Okay. Hey, Olivia, thank you so much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. No problem.
Olivia O'Malley over at CTV News. So look, the government said they would get tough, and this is about, I guess, as tough as you can get. And again, I know the numbers sound huge. $100,000 if you're Airbnb, even if you're a landlord, by the way. Let's say you own, a building here and a building there, and you have 5 units up and none of them comply. That's, in theory, that's $500,000 in fines. It's $100,000 per property you have listed that doesn't comply.
Well, and I also wonder I always tell about the days back on when I lived on the plateau and I had this fabulous apartment. When I was hard up, when I couldn't make rent, I would move out for a weekend and rent it out. This is like Craigslist prior to the days of Airbnb. But I wonder in a circumstance like that, surely the tenant who's subletting would also be culpable,
That's a good point.
Have to be held accountable.
That's a good point, right? You're no longer the landlord. It's not your unit. You're renting from someone else. You're subleasing, right? What sort of responsibility do you have? By the way, this whole idea of renting for just a weekend, that's something I didn't hear in this announcement, right? Part of the issue, I think, at one point was you're only to be able to rent these longer term. You want to stay a week, that's great. You will not be able to do a night or 2 nights. I didn't hear that anywhere in this announcement, but I wonder if it will be.
I can read you here. It says the bill would make it illegal to enter into a contract for a short-term rental online without a certificate, and the bill does define a short-term rental as less than 32 days.
Okay, but again,
so you have to have the certificate.
You get a certificate.
Yeah.
I wonder if that means you can only rent it for long term, or if that gives you the ability and the right to rent it for as little. You could rent it every single day if you wanted to.
Well, and it still, to me, leaves a bit of a loophole in that you can pretend you're renting for 32 plus days and really only stay for 3 and cancel the contract and not have a certificate, not have the
many
number.
Potential loopholes in there, huh? Worth mentioning, by the way, Airbnb, this is not the only place Airbnb has run into issues, right? There have been issues in other cities, and it's just interesting. They reported their earnings yesterday.
Oh, did they?
Stocks down 14% this morning because they reported what they expect will be lowered revenues. So I'm starting to think there are other cities around the world, particularly tourist cities, that are looking at this and go, you know what? We don't like this either. We don't want Airbnb here if we don't have to have them in, and it's going to hurt the company.
Regulation.
Yeah.
It's a little like Uber. Like you're like, hey, this is great. And then you realize how things can go so wrong.
Unless you drive a cab.
Yeah.